Marcus Bell stepped out of the plane, tired but proud. He had just returned home after 10 long months serving his country overseas. The air felt different in the airport, cold and busy with people rushing everywhere. He was still in his Army uniform, his chest full of medals, his duffel bag heavy on his shoulder. People glanced at him with curiosity, some with respect, and a few even nodded at him, recognizing the uniform. He gave them a small smile, though inside he was exhausted. All he wanted was to hug his mom, eat a home-cooked meal, and finally, sleep in his own bed. As he walked toward the baggage claim area, he pulled out his phone to text his friend, who was waiting outside to pick him up. His phone buzzed with messages from family members excited to see him. He smiled. After 10 months in dangerous conditions, he was finally safe. Home. But not everyone saw a hero when they looked at Marcus. 2 uniformed police officers, standing near the luggage area, watched him closely. One of them nudged the other and whispered, "Something." They kept their eyes fixed on Marcus, their expression slowly changing from curiosity to suspicion. Marcus didn't notice at first. He was busy looking for his bag. But after a minute he realized the officers were still staring. He looked up and gave them a polite nod, the kind he was trained to give. They didn't nod back. Instead, they began walking toward him with stiff steps, their hands already near their belts. Marcus felt a familiar chill run down his spine. He had seen this before. Not during war, but right here, in America. The taller officer was the first to speak. "Hey you, can we talk to you for a second?" His voice was firm and sharp, not the kind used for friendly conversation. Marcus turned to face them, keeping his hands visible just like he had been taught during countless safety talks. "Of course, sir," he said calmly. "Is something wrong?" The officer looked him up and down. "You just landed?" "Yes, sir." "I just came back from deployment," Marcus replied. "I'm waiting for my bag." The second officer stepped in. "Can we see some ID?" Marcus didn't hesitate. He reached slowly into his jacket and pulled out his military ID card. "Here you go," he said, handing it over. The officers didn't even take a full second to look at it. The taller one shook his head. "This could be fake. We've seen fake IDs before." Marcus blinked. "Excuse me." "Sir, this is a valid military ID. I'm Captain Marcus Bell of the U.S. Army." The officer narrowed his eyes. "You expect me to believe that? You think just wearing a uniform and carrying a card makes you a soldier?" The tone was changing quickly. Passengers nearby had started to notice. Some were whispering. Others had pulled out their phones, sensing that something wasn't right. Marcus took a deep breath. He wanted to stay calm. "Sir, I'm not trying to cause any trouble. I'm just trying to get home." But the officers weren't listening. The second one suddenly grabbed Marcus's arm, twisting it behind his back. "We're going to need you to come with us." Marcus was shocked. "Sir, please, there's no need for this. I'm not resisting. I've done nothing wrong." The taller officer pushed him roughly against the wall, making his military hat fall to the ground. "Stop talking," he said coldly. "We'll figure this out later." The handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Cold, tight, humiliating. People gasped. A woman shouted, "He's a soldier! What are you doing?" Another person held up their phone, recording everything. Marcus, still in uniform, was being handcuffed like a criminal. He looked around the terminal. A big American flag hung from the ceiling. He remembered saluting that flag before every mission. And now, under that same flag, he was being arrested for being a black man in uniform. His heart was pounding. Not from fear. He had faced gunfire, bombs, and death, but from humiliation, from anger, from sadness. The officers started leading him away. His duffel bag was still on the floor, unopened. He tried once more. "Please, check my records. Call the army, I'm not lying." But they didn't respond. One of them whispered something under his breath, something cruel and racist. Marcus heard it clearly, and though it hurt, he stayed silent. He knew that reacting would only make things worse. He walked quietly between them, the sound of the cuffs loud in his ears. Behind him, voices of people arguing with the officers grew louder. Someone said, "He's got medals. He's a war hero." Another person shouted, "This is racism, plain and simple." But Marcus kept walking. He had trained himself not to show emotion in moments of pressure. He had done it in war zones. He could do it here. Still, he couldn't stop the sting in his chest. Not from the cuffs, but from the betrayal. He had risked his life for this country. And in return, he was being treated like a criminal because of his skin color. As they led him past security gates, a Homeland Security officer noticed the commotion. He walked over, confused, and asked what was going on. One of the officers said, "Possible impersonator. Says he's military, but we're not buying it." The Homeland Security official frowned and turned to Marcus. "What's your name? Soldier?" "Captain Marcus Bell," Marcus answered quietly. "Let me see your ID," the officer said. One of the airport cops handed it over. The Homeland Security officer studied it, then looked at Marcus's face. His eyes widened. He pulled out a device and started checking Marcus's name through the official database. Within seconds, his expression changed completely. He looked at the police officers and said, "Do you have any idea who this is?" The officers stayed, silent. "This man is a decorated war hero," he said. "He received a Silver Star for bravery in Afghanistan. He saved 6 lives during a combat mission. You just handcuffed a national hero." The hallway went silent. The Homeland Security officer turned to Marcus. "I'm so sorry, sir. Please, let me get those cuffs off you right now." As Marcus stood, still the cuffs were finally removed. His wrists were red, his pride bruised. Around him, the people who had recorded the incident were now looking at him with awe and regret. But Marcus didn't feel proud. He felt empty. All he had done, all he had given, and this was how he was welcomed home. He picked up his bag slowly. A woman came up to him and said softly, "I'm so sorry this happened to you. I was recording everything. People need to see this." Marcus nodded politely. "Thank you." Outside, his friend was waiting in the car. When Marcus got in, he didn't say a word at first. His friend looked at him confused. "You okay, man? What took so long?" Marcus looked out the window at the airport he had once imagined as a place of arrival and joy. "They arrested me," he said quietly. "What? For what?" "For being black in a uniform," Marcus said. "That's all it took." His friend stared in disbelief. "You're kidding." "I wish I was." As the car pulled away from the airport, Marcus leaned his head against the window. He had faced bullets, bombings, and nights without sleep. But nothing hurt more than being treated like a stranger in the country he fought to protect. He wasn't just tired from the war overseas. He was tired of the war at home. And this time, the battlefield was much closer than he expected. Marcus Bell stood quietly, handcuffed in his army uniform, surrounded by people staring, whispering, and recording. His wrists were starting to ache, but what hurt more was the deep feeling of disrespect and humiliation. He had just come back from a 10-month deployment overseas, where he risked his life almost every day. He had survived gunfire, bombs, and nights full of fear. But now, back in his own country, in his own airport, he was being treated like a criminal just because of the color of his skin. The police officers who arrested him didn't care about the uniform. They didn't care about his medals, or that he had just landed after serving his country. All they saw was a black man standing alone. Their eyes were full of suspicion, not respect. Their questions were not to understand, but to accuse, even. After Marcus handed over his official military ID, they didn't believe him. One of the officers told him straight to his face that the ID might be fake. Marcus had felt angry, but he had stayed calm. He knew that showing anger could make things worse. That was a lesson every black man in America learned early. Stay calm, even when you're being treated unfairly. Now, as the officers held his arms and started pulling him away from the baggage area, Marcus noticed that people around him were no longer silent. A woman shouted, "He's a soldier! What are you doing?" Another man, holding up his phone and recording, said loudly, "This is wrong. He didn't do anything." But the officers ignored them. They tightened their grip on Marcus's arms and kept walking. One of them leaned close and said something in a low voice that made Marcus flinch. It was a racial slur, the kind of hateful word that people usually whispered when they thought no one could hear. Marcus heard it clearly, and though he felt that deep anger rising inside, he still stayed silent. Behind them, more people had started, recording. One woman, nearly in tears, said, "This is America? This is how we treat our soldiers?" As they walked through the terminal, Marcus kept his head up. He wasn't going to hang it in shame. He had done nothing wrong. His only mistake was looking a certain way. He remembered his last day on the military base, where his commander had shaken his hand and said, "You've made us proud, Captain Bell." That memory helped him stay strong now, even though he felt like everything was falling apart. The police officers walked him into a quiet hallway near the back of the terminal. It was away from the crowd. There, they stopped and began talking to each other like he wasn't even there. "What do you think?" one said. "I still don't buy it," the other replied. "Anyone can get a uniform these days. You can order one online. You saw the ID. Too clean, too shiny." Marcus turned his head slightly. "That ID was issued by the U.S. Army. You can call and verify it." One officer laughed. "Oh, we will. But you better hope you're not lying, or you'll be going to jail for impersonating a soldier." Marcus took a deep breath. "I'm not lying. I've served this country with honor." The taller officer walked closer and looked Marcus in the eye. "You don't look like any captain I've seen." Those words hit hard. Marcus looked at the man, his voice low but steady. "And what does a captain look like to you?" The officer didn't answer. Before anything else could be said, a sharp voice echoed from behind. "What's going on here?" A man in a dark suit with a Homeland Security badge on his chest had walked in. He had been alerted by one of the airport staff who saw the situation unfolding. His face was serious, and his eyes moved from Marcus to the officers. The officer who had arrested Marcus quickly replied, "Possible case of impersonation. This man claims to be military, but we haven't verified his ID yet." "We're just being careful." The Homeland Security agent raised an eyebrow. "Let me see the ID." Reluctantly, the officer handed it over. The agent looked at the card, then looked at Marcus. "What's your name, soldier?" "Captain Marcus Bell." The agent turned the card over, checking the barcode and the fine print. Then he pulled out a small device and scanned it. The screen lit up with official records. Within seconds, the agent's expression changed. His eyes widened slightly, and then his face grew serious again. He looked back at the officers. "You need to release him. Now." One of the officers looked confused. "What?" "But—" The agent cut him off. "Do you even know who this is? Captain Bell is a decorated soldier. He has a Silver Star for heroism. He served in multiple combat zones and has received commendations from the Department of Defense. You just handcuffed a national hero." The room went silent. The officers looked stunned. Marcus didn't say a word. He simply waited as the Homeland Security agent stepped forward and removed the cuffs from his wrists. "I'm very sorry, sir," the agent said sincerely. "This should never have happened." Marcus rubbed his sore wrists, his voice calm but cold. "No, it shouldn't have." One of the officers mumbled, "We were just doing our job." Marcus looked at him. "Then maybe you need to learn what your job really is." Outside the hallway, the situation was changing fast. Videos of the arrest were already spreading on social media. People had posted clips showing Marcus in handcuffs, still in uniform, and others shouting at the officers. The videos were being shared with hashtags like Black Soldier and Justice for Marcus. Within minutes, the story was trending online. Back inside, Marcus picked up his duffel bag and started walking out. As he passed the officers, he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Their faces were already full of regret and confusion. Few minutes later, he met his friend at the airport exit. "You okay?" his friend asked, shocked to see Marcus looking tense. Marcus nodded slowly. "Let's just go." As they drove away, Marcus stared out the window. The sky was clear, the sun was shining, and the city looked peaceful. But inside him, there was a storm, not just because of what happened, but because of what it meant. He had served this country with everything he had. He had lost friends in battle. He had seen pain, fear, and death. But nothing could have prepared him for the pain of being treated like a criminal in the country he fought to protect. He wasn't angry just for himself. He was angry for every young black man who got stopped for no reason. For every veteran who came home to disrespect instead of honor. For every person who had to prove their worth just to be treated like a human being. As the car drove through the city, Marcus finally spoke. "You know, when I was out there in the desert, we were all the same. Black, white, Latino. It didn't matter. We had each other's backs. We were brothers." His friend nodded. "But here it's different. No matter what you do, how much you give, some people will only see your skin." The rest of the ride was quiet, but something inside Marcus had changed. He knew this story wasn't over, and the world was about to hear it. Marcus Bell sat quietly in his friend's car as they drove through the city, away from the airport where everything had gone so wrong. Outside, the world looked normal. Cars moved along the roads, people walked with coffee cups in hand. Shops and restaurants were open like it was just another regular day. But for Marcus, everything had changed. Inside him, there was a strange mix of emotions: anger, sadness, disbelief, and a kind of tiredness that went deeper than just physical exhaustion. He had faced danger in war zones. He had led missions, where lives were at stake, but nothing had prepared him for the pain of being treated like a criminal in his own country, simply because of the color of his skin. His friend kept glancing at him, unsure what to say. "I still can't believe that happened, man," he finally said. "You? Arrested? In your own uniform?" Marcus didn't reply for a moment. He kept his eyes on the road ahead. Then, quietly, he said, "Neither can I." They reached Marcus's neighborhood, a quiet street with small houses, trees on both sides, and the smell of home-cooked food drifting from open windows. When they pulled up to his house, Marcus saw his mother standing on the porch, her hands folded tightly together. She had been waiting all day. The moment she saw him, her eyes filled with tears. He stepped out of the car and walked up the porch. Before he could say a word, his mother wrapped her arms around him and held him tightly. "Thank God you're home," she whispered. "Thank God." Marcus hugged her back, letting himself feel safe for the first time since landing. But even in her arms, he couldn't forget what had happened. His mother felt the tension in his body and pulled back to look into his eyes. "What's wrong, baby? Something happened, didn't it?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, Mama, something happened." Inside, as she served him a plate of his favorite food, fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and greens, Marcus told her everything. How the officers treated him, how they refused to believe his ID was real, how they handcuffed him in front of everyone, how they insulted him. His mother listened, her hands clenched tightly on the edge of the table. Tears ran down her cheeks as he spoke. "You wore that uniform with pride," she said. "You gave them your time, your heart, your life. And this is how they thank you?" Marcus looked down at his plate. "I thought coming home would feel different. I thought I'd feel respected, appreciated." She reached across the table and held his hand. "You are respected. Maybe not by them, but by me, by your family. by the people who know who you really are. Later that night, Marcus sat alone in his room. His phone was blowing up, messages from fellow soldiers, friends, strangers who had seen the video online. The story had gone viral. People were sharing the video across social media, and news outlets had started picking it up. Headlines read, "Black soldier arrested after landing at airport. Hero or criminal?" The question he shouldn't have to answer, and racism in uniform, a veteran's painful welcome home. Marcus scrolled through the messages. Some were supportive. Veterans saying they stood with him, strangers expressing outrage, others sharing their own experiences with racism. But there were also hateful messages. Some people called him a liar. Others said he must have done something wrong. A few even said, "You people always play the race card." He set the phone down, overwhelmed. His heart felt heavy. The next day, a reporter showed up outside his house. Then another. Soon, news vans lined the street. Everyone wanted to talk to the soldier who had been arrested for simply being himself. At first, Marcus didn't want to speak. He wasn't looking for fame. He didn't want to become a symbol. He just wanted peace. But then he remembered how it felt in that airport, with cold metal cuffs on his wrists, people staring, and the officers' voices full of doubt and hate. And he thought, if he stayed silent, maybe nothing would change. So he agreed to speak. The first interview aired that evening. Marcus sat in his uniform, his voice calm but powerful. "I love my country," he said. "That's why I served. But loving your country doesn't mean ignoring its flaws. What happened to me isn't new. It happens to people like me all the time. The difference is, this time, it was caught on camera." He talked about the pain of being treated like a threat instead of a protector. He talked about the importance of dignity, of fairness, of truth. The video of the interview was shared millions of times. People started using his name as a hashtag. Protests broke out in different cities. People held up signs that said, "Justice for Captain Bell," "Black Heroes Matter," and "Enough is enough." The police department released a short statement saying they were reviewing the situation. But no apology came. Not from the officers, not from the department. Nothing. Days passed. The pressure grew. Celebrities started talking about Marcus on social media. Even some politicians made statements. One senator said, "Captain Bell represents the very best of America. That he was treated with such disrespect is a stain on us all." Marcus was invited to speak at events. Schools asked him to talk to students. Veterans organizations asked him to share his story. But no matter how many people supported him, a part of Marcus still felt broken. He kept thinking about the moment the officer looked him in the eye and said, "You don't look like any captain I've seen." That sentence stayed with him. Because it wasn't just about one man's ignorance, it was about a deeper sickness. A belief that certain people don't belong, even when they've done everything right. One evening, as Marcus sat on his porch, a group of young boys walked by. They stopped when they saw him. "Are you the soldier from the video?" one of them asked. Marcus nodded. "You're a hero," another boy said. "You stood up," Marcus smiled softly. "I just told the truth." The boys nodded and kept walking, but Marcus sat there for a long time thinking. Maybe this was his mission now, not fighting enemies on the battlefield, but fighting the ones in people's minds and hearts. That week, a local civil rights lawyer reached out to him. "Captain Bell," she said, "I believe you have a case. We can take legal action. What they did to you wasn't just wrong, it was illegal." At first, Marcus wasn't sure. He wasn't the type to sue or demand money. But the lawyer explained, "This isn't just for you. It's for everyone who's ever been stopped unfairly. For every young man who was treated like a suspect instead of a citizen." Marcus thought about it deeply. Then he agreed. The case quickly gained national attention. The lawsuit wasn't just about false arrest, it was about racism, dignity, and justice. The police department finally responded. They claimed it was a misunderstanding. They said they didn't recognize the ID. They said the officers followed protocol. But Marcus's lawyer was ready. She presented evidence, expert witnesses, and statements from military officials confirming Marcus's identity, his service, and his rank. Videos showed clearly that Marcus was calm, respectful, and cooperative at all times. The court was filled with people watching the trial closely, some veterans, some activists, and many who just wanted to see justice. One of the most powerful moments came when Marcus himself took the stand. He looked around the courtroom and said, "I didn't come here to attack anyone. I came here to ask for fairness. I put on this uniform because I believed in something bigger than myself. I believed in protecting people. I believed in justice. And I still do." He paused and looked directly at the officers who had arrested him. But believing in justice means holding people accountable when they do wrong. It means admitting mistakes and learning from them. What happened to me was not just a mistake. It was a choice. A choice based on how I look. The courtroom was silent. When the verdict came, it was clear. The court ruled in Marcus's favor. The officers were found to have acted with racial bias and without proper cause. The police department was ordered to pay damages and publicly apologize. More importantly, changes were made. The department had to implement new training programs focused on racial bias and proper handling of identification. Officers were required to complete workshops led by veterans and civil rights leaders. A new review board was created to investigate similar complaints in the future. Marcus didn't smile when he heard the verdict. He didn't cheer. He simply nodded. He knew this was just one small step. But it mattered. After the trial, Marcus was invited to speak at a large gathering of veterans and soldiers. As he stood at the podium, he looked at the sea of faces before him. People of every color, every background. "I didn't ask to become a voice for this," he said. "But I won't run from it either. Because silence allows injustice to grow. And I won't be silent anymore." The room stood in applause. Later that night, Marcus sat alone again, thinking. The journey he thought would end when he stepped off that plane had only just begun. But this journey felt important. Not just for him, but for everyone who had ever felt unseen, unheard, or unwanted. He still wore the uniform proudly. But now, he wore something else too. A quiet strength that came from standing up, not just on battlefields, but in the face of injustice. Marcus Bell had come home. And now, he was fighting for a different kind of freedom. Marcus Bell's life had changed forever after the court decision. Winning the case was not just about the money or the apology. It was about proving a point. It was about saying, "We exist, we matter, and we won't stay silent." But after all the noise, all the cameras, all the attention, Marcus just wanted one thing: peace. He tried to return to a normal life, but it was not easy. People recognized him everywhere. Some would shake his hand and thank him for standing up. Others gave him long looks, as if they were unsure whether to admire him or doubt him. He still went on morning runs in the neighborhood, still helped his mom with groceries, and still spent evenings sitting quietly on his porch. But now, his name was part of a national conversation. Schools used his story to teach about injustice. News channels sometimes played clips from his interview. And across the country, people were still talking about what happened to the black soldier in uniform who was arrested at the airport. One morning, Marcus received a letter in the mail. It wasn't from a fan, a lawyer, or a reporter. It was from one of the police officers who had arrested him. The letter was handwritten and shaky, as if the person writing it had struggled with the words. It said, "Captain Bell, I'm one of the officers who arrested you that day. I don't expect forgiveness, and I won't try to explain away my actions. I just want to say I'm sorry. I didn't see you that day. I saw what I've been trained to fear. But that's not your fault. It's mine. And I'm trying to change. Officer D. Marcus read the letter twice. He didn't know what to feel. Part of him wanted to throw it away. But another part of him, maybe the part that still believed in people, kept it. The days went on, and people continued to invite him to speak. One invitation came from a high school teacher who wanted him to talk to a group of young students. Marcus hesitated, but finally agreed. When he arrived, the students were waiting in the auditorium, buzzing with energy and curiosity. Stood in front of them, wearing a simple jacket, no uniform, no medals, just himself. "You all know what happened to me," he began. "But I want to talk about what came after. I want to talk about choices." The room quieted. "I could have stayed quiet. I could have walked away. But I chose to speak up, not because I wanted attention, but because silence helps the problem grow. And I knew that if I didn't speak, someone else might go through the same thing. Someone like one of you." He looked around the room. "You don't have to wear a uniform to fight for what's right. Sometimes just telling the truth is a kind of battle. And standing by someone who's been hurt, that's bravery too." After the talk, a girl came up to him with tears in her eyes. "My brother was arrested last year for something he didn't do," she said. "They let him go later, but he's never been the same. Thank you for saying something. For not staying." "Quiet." Marcus placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "He matters. And you do, too." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about all the people who didn't get cameras or interviews or court cases. The ones who were hurt quietly, and whose stories disappeared without justice. He started writing. Not for anyone else. For himself. Page after page, he wrote what he felt, what he saw, what he believed. He wrote about the war, about the airport, about what it felt like to be both a hero and a suspect in the same day. He didn't realize it at the time, but those writings would soon become something much bigger. A few weeks later, a friend of his, who worked in publishing, read his pages and said, "This needs to be a book. People need to hear your voice." At first, Marcus wasn't sure. He wasn't a writer. He was a soldier. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized, maybe this was his mission now. Maybe his story wasn't just his own, but something others could learn from, so he said yes. It took months, but eventually the book came out. Its title was simple, Seen. Inside were his memories, his pain, and his hope. People across the country read it. Some cried, some got angry, some finally understood something they never saw before. Marcus was invited to a large talk show to discuss the book. As he sat under the studio lights, the host asked, "Captain Bell, what do you want people to take away from this story?" Marcus thought for a moment. Then he said, "I want people to know that we're not invisible. That respect should not depend on your skin color, or your uniform, or your title. Everyone deserves dignity. That's what I fought for overseas, and that's what I'm still fighting for now." The crowd clapped, but Marcus wasn't looking for applause. He just wanted change. One day, months after the book was released, Marcus received another letter. This time it was from the Army. It invited him to speak at the U.S. Military Academy. He hadn't expected that. Part of him wondered if they were just trying to clean up their image. But he accepted anyway. When he arrived at the academy, he stood in front of rows of young soldiers in training, all of them looking at him, listening. "I wore this uniform because I believed in justice," he said. "But justice doesn't stop when the war ends. It has to live in how we treat people every single day. In airports, in streets, in schools, in police stations." He looked out at the sea of young faces. "You have a choice. You can be part of the problem, or you can be part of the change." After his speech, several cadets came up to thank him. One of them, a young Latino man, said, "Sir, I almost quit last year. I thought there was no place for someone like me here, but after hearing you, I think I'll stay." That night, Marcus sat in his hotel room, watching the lights of the Chao city through the window. He thought about how strange life was, how something painful had opened doors he never imagined, how something ugly had led to something honest, something powerful. But the journey wasn't over. In the following months, Marcus worked with local leaders to create programs for young people, especially kids of color, who needed guidance, support, and someone to believe in them. He helped raise funds for scholarships. He mentored students who dreamed of joining the military, becoming doctors, lawyers, or just finding a better path. He returned to the same airport where it all started, but this time not in handcuffs. This time, he walked in as a guest speaker for airport security staff. They had invited him to help them understand what went wrong that day and how to make sure it never happened again. He stood in front of a group of officers and said, "I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to teach, because mistakes can become lessons if we're brave enough to face them." He spoke about bias, about seeing people clearly, about slowing down before making judgments. At the end of the session, one of the officers came up and said, "I remember that day. I didn't say anything. I didn't stop it, and I've regretted it ever since. Thank you for coming back." Marcus nodded. It's never too late to do better. That night, as he sat in the airport waiting for his flight, a little boy walked up to him holding his mother's hand. "Are you the soldier from the TV?" the boy asked. Marcus smiled. "Yes, I am." The boy's eyes lit up. "You're a hero." Marcus looked at the boy, then at his mother, and then back at the boy. He placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "So are you. Never forget that." When his flight was called, Marcus stood, picked up his bag, and walked toward the gate. He was no longer just a soldier. He was a symbol, a teacher, a voice. And his journey wasn't finished yet. Marcus Bell sat in his quiet living room staring out the window. The world outside was calm. Trees swayed gently and kids rode their bikes down the street. Life had found a strange kind of balance again. After all the interviews, the speeches, the book tours, and the unexpected fame, Marcus was finally able to slow down a bit. But something inside him still didn't rest. He knew his journey had started because of an injustice, and even though he had made his voice heard, there were so many others who had no one to speak for them. He remembered every moment from that day at the airport, the stares, the harsh tone of the officers, the fear and humiliation he felt even while wearing the very uniform that should have protected him. He thought about how many others had faced similar moments and didn't have cameras or witnesses, people who were stopped, judged, or hurt simply because of how they looked. One evening, Marcus received a message from an organization that worked with wrongly accused individuals across the country. They wanted him to join as a board member, not just as a figurehead, but to help lead campaigns and connect with communities. Marcus thought about it for a few days, then said yes. He didn't want his story to be just a headline. He wanted it to become part of something bigger, something that changed lives. As he began his work with the organization, he traveled to different cities. In each place, he met families who had lost someone to police violence or had loved ones locked up without proper evidence. These weren't just sad stories. They were real lives affected by broken systems. Marcus sat with them, listened to them, and cried with them. They didn't just see him as a soldier, they saw him as someone who understood. In one city, he met a young boy named Elijah. He was only 14 but had already been stopped by police 3 times in 1 year. His crime? Walking home with a hoodie on. Elijah was smart, funny, and had dreams of being an architect. But he had started skipping school, afraid of walking alone. His mother, Maria, told Marcus with tears in her eyes, "He used to smile so much. Now he barely talks." Marcus knelt down to Elijah and said, "I see you, Elijah, and I believe in you. Don't let fear take away your dreams." You're more powerful than you know. He stayed in touch with Elijah and even helped arrange a mentorship program for him with a local architect. Slowly, Elijah started to smile again. Moments like this kept Marcus going. But there were hard days too. Days when people doubted him. Days when social media exploded with hate messages. Some called him a liar, others accused him of playing the victim. But Marcus had grown used to it. He knew that when you speak truth, not everyone will be ready to hear it. One evening, Marcus was invited to a national conference on criminal justice reform. Leaders, lawmakers, police chiefs, and activists were all going to be there. When Marcus stepped onto the stage, there was a long silence. Everyone knew who he was. He looked across the room and began to speak, slowly but clearly. Change isn't a speech. It's not a press release. It's not a new policy that gathers dust. Real change is uncomfortable. It's hard. It forces us to look in the mirror and ask, "Am I part of the problem?" He continued, "I serve this country because I believe in its promise. But a promise means nothing if we don't keep it. And we've broken that promise for too many people, too many times." The room was quiet. People weren't used to hearing soldiers talk this way. But Marcus wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a voice for justice. After the conference, a high-ranking police officer approached him. "Captain Bell, I was in charge of airport security at the time of your incident," the man said quietly. "I wasn't there that day, but it happened under my watch. I want you to know I've changed the way we train our officers. We now include your story in every session." Marcus nodded. Then that day meant something. Months later, Marcus was offered a position in Washington, D.C., a special advisor role to work with the Department of Justice on matters related to policing and discrimination. It was a big decision. He had always been a man of action, not politics. But after talking with his mother and close friends, he accepted the position. He moved to D.C., leaving behind his quiet hometown life. His apartment overlooked the Capitol, a place he had once only seen on television. Now, he walked its halls, met with lawmakers, and helped shape policies that could impact millions. Even with the high position, Marcus never forgot where he came from. Every weekend, he would visit local schools or community centers. He believed that the real work happened there, in the eyes of young kids who still believed the world could be better. One weekend, he returned to his hometown for a surprise event. The city had named a community center after him, the Marcus Bell Center for Justice and Leadership. When he walked in, hundreds of people clapped and cheered. His mother stood in the front row holding back tears. Elijah and Maria were there too, smiling proudly. Marcus took the microphone and said, "I never asked for fame. I only asked for fairness. But if my story helps even one person stand taller, then everything was worth it." He spent the evening talking to kids, signing books, and taking photos. But what touched him most was when a small girl hugged him and said, "I want to be strong like you." He looked at her and smiled. "You already are." That night, back in his childhood bedroom, Marcus looked at the wall where his old army medals still hung. Next to them now was a photo of the community center, a newspaper clipping of his court victory, and a drawing Elijah had made of a beautiful building with the words, "Dream Big," at the top. His journey had started with pain, but it had led to purpose. He had been broken, but he had healed stronger. And in doing so, he had helped others believe in healing too. But Marcus knew the fight was far from over. In his work with the Department of Justice, he pushed for new rules that required better training for officers, more accountability, and stronger community relationships. He helped launch programs that connected officers with local youth, hoping to build trust before fear ever had a chance to grow. One of the biggest changes came when Congress passed the Bell Reform Act, named in his honor. It focused on ending racial profiling, increasing body camera usage, and protecting the rights of civilians during police interactions. When it passed, Marcus didn't cheer or dance. He sat quietly in his office, tears in his eyes, not for himself, but for all the people who had never gotten justice. Later that year, Marcus received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. As he stood beside the president, cameras flashing, the applause loud and endless, he thought about the airport. About the moment they pushed him against the wall, about how he had felt like nothing. Now, he was being honored as one of the bravest voices in the country. When asked what he would say to the officers who had arrested him that day, Marcus responded calmly, "I'd say thank you, because that day opened my eyes, and the country's, and from pain, I found purpose." His words echoed across media, classrooms, and homes. Years passed. Marcus continued to work, speak, and write. He published a second book, this one filled with stories of people he had met. Stories of strength, loss, courage, and truth. It became a bestseller too. One day, while walking through a park, Marcus saw an older man sitting alone. It was Officer D, the same one who had written him that first letter. The man looked up and recognized him. "Captain Bell," he said quietly. Marcus sat down next to him. They didn't speak for a long time, just sat in silence. Finally, Officer D said, "I've spent years trying to forgive myself. I know it doesn't fix anything. But I needed to tell you, I changed because of you." Marcus nodded. "We all have to change." They shook hands and the man walked away slowly. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was a moment of peace. As the sun set, Marcus walked home alone. The air was cool and the city was quiet. He had started as a soldier, became a symbol, and now he was something more, a reminder, a lesson, a legacy. And his story would continue, not just in books or awards, but in the lives of those who now stood taller, spoke louder, and dreamed bigger because of him.